I'm listening to MSNBC Hee Haw, so you guys don't have to. And the hosts are just going on and on and on about how irresponsible and destructive to the Republic Donald Trump's failure to concede the election. The deranged versus the delusional, they said. Now, this is what much of the country hears. What nerve, what gall. Hillary Clinton, other Democrats for 4 years, as recently as weeks before the election, referred to President Trump as illegitimate. I say again, 78% of Democrats believe that the Russians not only interfered, which they clearly did, but that the interference changed vote outcomes. Whether they believe the Russians changed vote tallies or whether they believe whatever the Russians did changed the outcome of the vote, that's what 78% of Democrats believe, despite the fact the intelligence community has never reached that conclusion. You remember the chant, Bush lied, people died? That Bush intentionally lied about the intel leading up to the war because he wanted to be a wartime president, because he thinks he looks good in camouflage, because he wanted to avenge his father. I'm not sure what your theory is. But that's what Democrats chanted. To this day, a majority of Democrats believe that George W. Bush either lied us into the war in Iraq or that there is a strong likelihood that he did. That's what a majority of Democrats believe, despite the fact that there was the Rob, R-O-B-B, Silber, S-I-L-B like boy, E-R-M-A-N commission, bipartisan, set up by Congress to look up the intelligence leading to the run-up to the war, to find out whether anybody lied, to find out whether anybody fabricated any intel, and they concluded, bipartisan, that nobody lied. The intel was wrong, but the analysts in good faith assumed that Saddam Hussein had stockpiles of WMG. In fact, Bill Clinton's top Persian Gulf advisor wrote a piece in the Washington Monthly, and he said, look, the intelligence that George W. Bush had is exactly the same intelligence we had. I'm not saying I supported him going to war in Iraq, but I certainly am not going to say that he lied about the intelligence. It was the same intel we got. In fact, when we got it, I said, does anybody dissent from this intel? The only dissent was a disagreement over how far along Saddam Hussein was in getting a nuke. But there was no disagreement that he had stockpiles of WMD. No disagreement. We were wrong. Still, a majority of Democrats believe that George W. Bush lied us into the war, or that there's a strong possibility that he did. In fact, I think I've told you this story. I campaigned with Donald Trump in 2016. We were together in Cleveland, and we had maybe 10 minutes to speak one-on-one, and I said to him, there is one thing you should apologize for. And he goes, well, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say I should apologize for what I said about John McCain. And I said, no. Couldn't care less. You should apologize for publicly saying that George W. Bush, quote, lied us into the war. I know that you say you didn't support the Iraq war, which is fine, but for you to add energy to this smear that George W. Bush lied us into the Iraq war, you're giving aid and comfort to the Democrats, and you are reinforcing arguably the biggest smear, negative mark on the Republican brand in the last 50 years, the Iraq war. It's one thing to say that you oppose it. It's one thing to say you think in retrospect it's a bad idea. It's one thing to say you were against it from the very beginning. It's another thing to say that it was built upon a lie. That is a lie. In fact, there is a reporter named Ron Fournier. He was the Washington, D.C. bureau chief of the Associated Press. That's how big a deal he was. After the Rob Silberman Commission came out, he publicly said George W. Bush lied us into the war. Silberman, the co-chair of the Rob Silberman Commission, contacted him and said, what are you saying? We went over all of this. It's not true. You're undermining confidence in our intelligence establishment. Take it back. And he didn't. He wouldn't take it back. So Silberman wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal going after Ron Fournier, saying, how dare you? We went over all of this. Nobody lied. Intelligence was wrong. Nobody lied. And for you to continue saying this, even after the commission has gone all this, shows that you are simply biased. And now the same Democrats who believe, even though the Silverman Commission said it's not true, that George W. Bush lied us into the war, or the strong possibility that he did, the same people that for 4 years claimed that Donald Trump was illegitimate, 78% of them believe that the Russians changed the outcome of the election, even though our intelligence community has never reached that conclusion, and you have the nerve to accuse Donald Trump of being delusional when he insists that the election was a fraud? Given all of these allegations, far more allegations for this than you ever had for the idea that Bush lied, people died. Far more evidence than you ever had that Donald Trump was colluding with Russia, yet there was a 2.5-year investigation. How dare you? You've got election officials like this woman in Michigan.
Mixed with clerical errors, but a lot of them are considered fraud. I would have referred all of them to the Attorney General if it were me.
And we got all these other allegations. Allegations made about the election in Georgia, allegations made about the election in Arizona, the extension of the deadline in Pennsylvania, which I think is one of their solid cases. It's working its way up, hopefully, to the Supreme Court. Hopefully they'll take this. Far more evidence, far more ammo, far more smoke than you ever had about Bush lied, people died, about Trump-Russia collusion, about Trump being an illegitimate president. But Donald Trump is delusional for wanting to make sure he lost fair and square, assuming that he did? You guys have a lot of nerve. Karen Bass, one of the Democrat members of the House, regarding the election officials who flouted the rules. You got video of them pulling ballots from a desk after the poll workers have left. She said, well, they were just making, quote, honest mistakes, close quote. Shoe on the other foot, you guys would be in the streets. They'd be running out of pitchforks. They'd be surrounding the White House. They'd be chanting, you stole the election, you stole the election. If the shoe were on the other foot and you had all these individuals coming forth, high-tech people saying it's mathematically impossible, how is it that you're winning Wisconsin, winning Michigan, winning Pennsylvania at night, and all of a sudden a bunch of ballots come in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you wouldn't be asking questions? Please. I'm Larry Elder.